Hey, well, welcome back, everybody, to the Oasis Turf and Tree Lawn and Order podcast.
There we go.
I'm David.
And I'm Andrew. He is the and I am the but.
Oh. We are what we are.
And this is Leif Erickson back here, our special guest. That's my new name for the plant. We talked about it last time, and you said Charles Barkley, but I don't see a lot of bark, so
no bark.
Leif Erickson
All leaf.
This week.
No bite.
In this episode, we're going to talk about kind of what's going on out in the field in our area, what we can expect out of the climate. We're also going to get into some questions from social media, what people are seeing, what questions everybody has about the properties that.
Yeah, I think we have some pictures that we're going to look at, just kind of give some pointers if anybody's asking for some, or just what we're seeing, and if it was a lawn or maybe that you have, or maybe it's a lawn that looks a lot like one that you've got, some things that you can be doing right now just to help yourself out, help the lawn out, get it to a place where you're happy with it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right now this year, there's no such thing as a standard year in the green industry.
No.
We get different challenges, different things happen every single year, but what is most prevalent this year right now is how warm it has been and how fast everything is moving. Mm-hmm. Most of our plants base their life cycle on temperatures that come around and a lot of our pests. Right now in the Cincinnati area, we are well ahead of our normal temperatures for the year. And what we do, to get a little technical, is based off of what we would call growing degree days, and that is how we are going to gauge when plants are going to germinate, when pests are going to emerge, and we're going to see that. And we are about twice as high as a normal year at this point, which creates some challenge for what we're seeing out in the field.
And I don't really like the term growing degree days. You and I have kind of talked about this before, where it's deceiving exactly what that means. You think of a day as an actual just calendar day, right? A day of the week, just adding on, so on and so forth. But really, when we say growing degree days, what it is, it's an accumulation of the average temperature, and it's how many degrees or how many days above 50 degrees.
Correct.
Total, like I said, average, all compiled. Right. So it's a rolling number that just continues on and on. So when we say growing degree days, we might be talking about 322. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, wow, that's really late in the year. And no, it's
we're
not.
100 days into the year, but we're pushing 500 growing degree days into our season. So it accumulates as the year goes on. But all of that to say is everything is moving very fast this year as far as emergence. Mm-hmm. We're talking about pests and weeds and plant blooms and all of those. They're moving much quicker than we would normally expect to see them.
Yes, typically. But they still fall in line with what we would expect to happen. So one of the first budding events, so I'm looking at trees, maples, and more particularly, I believe it's the red maple that we are going to see buds on first. I'm looking out the window. We're well past that. That is one of the first calendar marks that I am expecting to see visually. And it doesn't really matter on the calendar date. It's the growing degree days that we're talking about. Right. And then everything kind of falls in line after that.
Right. And so typically we see a healthy amount of early spring weeds that will come up right as our growing season starts, and those are going to continue typically closer into the summer. We are even starting to see some of those draw back a little bit, and it's only mid-April. So some of our more prevalent springtime weeds like hairy bittercress, lesser celandine, those are starting to come to the end of their life cycle that we would normally see on a regular year. It's just a little bit faster. And so that means we can start to expect to see those summertime weeds coming up a little bit earlier than we would normally expect to see them during the normal year that
the average year. But that has a lot to do with how we experience year in, year out. We talk a lot about averages just because there are extremes every single year. You said it at the very beginning. You're not wrong. There's no just straightforward year. No. There's always going to be some sort of curveball that we have to worry about. This year, it's just everything's coming a lot faster than normal. Mm-hmm. Good news is I haven't seen any crabgrass. That's kind of one of the big summertime weeds that we have to deal with around here. We did reach the point where the germination of those seeds has 50%. We're past that at this point in time, but we haven't physically seen anything, which is a good sign.
The difference between germination and emergence too can be touched on, because germination, that just means the root system is starting to develop. The seed is starting to grow into the roots, and we're not actually seeing that top growth coming up just yet.
Yeah.
We can expect to see that in the coming weeks. Nothing, as far as what I've seen, is actually out there with top growth on it just yet, but we know that it's coming, and it's coming a little bit quicker than we would normally expect.
And we can still put down pre-emergent where, because that top growth is not really well established and the roots themselves are not established very well, we're still going to get good results with some pre-emergence. We are getting towards the time frame where we want to be closer to the end of that. But we've touched on it before. The reason why we do a split application is exactly for the reasons like this, to where we can get ahead of it, and we also have any of the late germinating plants, anything like that. I have seen some field paspalum.
Yes.
Some people get a little confused for Dallas grass. They are both types of paspalum, which is a perennial grassy weed. It's pretty stubborn, but that's also something I'm expecting to see before crabgrass, so I'm not surprised that I've seen it and I haven't seen crabgrass yet. One thing I like to talk about is they do look very similar, especially when first starting out, and the untrained eye is definitely gonna see something and be like, oh man, I've got crabgrass, and you might be trying to apply something that specifically targets crabgrass. You're going to be wasting your money.
Yeah, it's not going to do much. Like you said, it's a perennial plant, where crabgrass is an annual plant. The products that are engineered to control crabgrass aren't specifically engineered to control that paspalum. So they're coming up. Luckily enough for all of our customers, our first round of pre-emergent has gone down. So we've got that start for the protection, unless somebody's joining on. The first round of that pre-emergent is down and ready to go.
Yeah.
And we will get a second application of that down to fortify that barrier for those late bloomers that are going to come up, because we'll see that growing all the way through the summer once it really starts to pop.
And anybody who's doing this at home on their own and doesn't have some professionals helping them, you can still put down a pre-emergent. Like I said, it's going to be helping. You just need to keep in mind that because we have had some of those grass plants already germinate, and if you have not put down any pre-emergent, there's going to be some breakthrough.
Right.
Don't be overly stressed by that or be disappointed with that. That's how these things go. If we're not making timely treatments, we can expect some problems. Most of the time it's going to be a breakthrough, whether it's weeds or insects, based off of what we're trying to control preventatively.
And touching on insects too, those are well ahead of an average year right now. With so many of our insect pests, a lot of their life cycle is dependent on temperatures. So early ones that we would normally see, like the leaf miners, the things that are insulated inside of the plants, those are getting ready to hit their adult emergence. So some of the damaging life stages of those, the nymphs, the larvae, those are already developing. And so those may be getting in and out, but that means our summertime pests are going to be right around the corner looking for that. And one of the things that we have been kind of in ground zero for in the US is the box tree moth. That's a newly invasive pest that we have been dealing with for just a couple of years now, and those are starting to rear up. So luckily we have gotten some experience under our belts dealing with these, and we can get those taken care of. But when they do develop, and we do get these temperatures for them to start developing and causing damage to the plants, they do so very, very quickly. So we have to be right up on top of getting those taken care of as soon as we find them.
We've been pleasantly surprised where we've had a lot of box trees or boxwoods that have refoliated. It's something that's kind of amazing. We were really worried about it. We've had some really good growth just push back out. The question is how long can the plant sustain that? How many times can this happen over and over again? Because they're using up stores that they have in case of emergency. How many times can they reuse this? We don't really know the answer before the plant just doesn't have anything left to give. So we're trying to avoid that before it becomes an actual issue.
Yeah, and I say it all the time, everything as far as maintaining plant health has to do with balancing stresses that are on the plant. So these box tree moth caterpillars that are causing their damage, that is an additional and very heavy stress that applies to these boxwoods specifically. When we are experiencing a year like we are right now, where it is a little bit warmer, the rain has slowed down pretty drastically, those high temperatures, lack of moisture, those are also stresses. So they're kind of going to pile up over there. And so we need to do everything that we can to minimize the stresses that we can control. And we can get good control of the box tree caterpillars as long as we know that they're out there. Making sure that these plants are getting watered correctly is huge. It's really early in the year. We talk about moisture regulation every single time that we get on here, but that is one of the best ways to ensure that your plant isn't undergoing any unnecessary stress.
Yeah. And another thing that we're really fortunate in is that boxwoods are not a native species in our area. And a lot of times when we talk about that, we think it's a bad thing. They're controllable. They're not invasive. They're just not native. But because of that, we end up having pockets where we might have some box tree moths that are going crazy in the landscape, but it's not as easy for them to get to other locations. Now, the adult stage is a moth. Obviously, they can fly, they have wings, they can get other places, but it's a lot slower for them to eat through all of these plants. Whereas other places, like in Europe, they are native and they're going through woods. You would find them just naturally occurring. The caterpillars are going to just go through all of that stuff so quickly. They've had a much harder time taking care of this than we've had. So we're lucky on a couple different fronts, but that's one that I think of often.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's one of the big things that we look for in the tree world right now, the tree and shrub care side of the business. That's what we're keeping an eye on, are these newly emerging pests that are coming up. It's going to continue to show new pests over the coming weeks, whether that's scale insects or mites that we get to when it starts getting real warm. Those different insects, they will reproduce very, very rapidly once we get to those really warm temperatures, which luckily we're not at that stage just yet. That's when we will see those populations really start to explode.
Yes. I mean, I think that pretty much sums up what we're dealing with right now. Now we're going to go through some pictures we pulled from Reddit, r/lawncare, just kind of go over what's happening in the picture. So the first one, absolutely new to lawn care. What are some general things I can do to make this look half decent, Andrew?
Well, it all starts with IDing what we're actually looking at when we're seeing these pictures. And sometimes a picture gets you a lot of good information, and sometimes it does make it a little bit difficult to tell the entire outlook of the property. So what I'm seeing a lot of right here is a lot of matting.
Yes.
So that's going to be previous damage. That could be grub damage from years past. That could even be a picture that was taken in the early springtime of a warm season grass that hasn't come out of dormancy yet.
Right.
So aeration is huge, and then establishing favorable grass plants. Especially when we're getting this matting that we're seeing right here, people will assume that that is a thatch layer specifically, which is not necessarily always true. Thatch is going to be made of the harder plant materials, roots, stems. We can kind of relieve some of that compaction, some of that thatch with an aeration to get that started, and then we want to look at selecting a proper plant. Planting is a little bit difficult with our program specifically because we are putting down that pre-emergent. If you want to get a little bit established, that is possible to do. You just have to make sure that everything is getting watered correctly and don't expect it all to fill in all at once. This is going to be a multiple seeding kind of reestablishment.
The expectation is a really good point too, is we don't want you to go out there, throw a whole bunch of money and time into this, and then your expectations are out of place. I think to add on to that, proper cultural practices are always going to be one of my first steps. So aeration is one of those.
Absolutely.
But even just mowing and making sure you're properly mowing, and then proper watering, aeration, overseeding, and picking the right type of grass. Turf type tall fescue for us. All in all, where this lawn is right now, there's a lot of room for improvement, but it's not like it's a lost cause. I see a dandelion. There might be a few other things, especially on the other side of the sidewalk, where some touch up with some weed controls might be necessary.
The first comment, can I overseed now, or is it just for the fall? You can, you just have to have the proper expectations on how it's going to be managed, and manage what else is going down onto the lawn so that you're not working against yourself.
Yep.
All right, number 2, just moved into my new house and need some advice on where to start.
Perfect. So as I'm looking at this picture, I can tell that we are in the fall. The leaves on the tree are starting to fall, or have mostly fallen at this point in time. But really what I'm seeing is how much brown is in the lawn. So what that tells me is that we had a lot of annual weedy grasses. We might have had some season perennials, so something like Philopaspaelum, but I'm just gonna go out on a limb with how small the grass blades look, at least from my point of view. We're dealing with a lot of crabgrass. It's not that brown, like Andrew had mentioned, nimblewill, where that almost looks like a straw, right? Crabgrass is an annual weedy grass. It is a summer annual. And what happens is once we get our first frost of the fall, that plant shuts down. It is no longer. It has dropped any seed that it was going to. It is never coming back because it is an annual. That is part of its life cycle. But then it turns more of an orangish brown. Where they can start, knowing that there's crabgrass here and the amount that they had, I go into next year, I need to be putting a pre-emergent down on the lawn. I need to be doing that early spring, late spring, so that way I can protect the lawn as best as possible from as much crabgrass as I possibly can. I'm also seeing a mulch volcano where that's not going to be the most healthiest for the tree. It's very easy to fix. Just kind of pull back some of that mulch around the base of the tree, and that's going to be doing a lot better.
A lot of this patchiness, that kind of speckling that we're seeing in the areas with the crabgrass, there could be even another issue that's underlying underneath the soil itself. Aeration is great and can not be overdone where we are, but I would hazard a guess that there is a healthy amount of rocks up underneath this lawn too that are providing a lot of extra heat right into the root zone of those grass plants, and that's going to be struggling. So aeration consistently over time can help to kind of pull those out. As funny as it sounds, in a lawn, rocks will float to the surface kind of over time, and it's not going to be a fast recovery on that front at all. But as you kind of aerate that soil and get the soil broken down a little bit, that's going to pull those out.
Aeration can be done even after the overseeding season is come and gone. It's a physical process. Like you said, you cannot do it too many times. We want to be able to get the air nutrients to the root zone. That's definitely going to help something like this. You can still fertilize. We do winterizing fertilizers here where it's high in nitrogen, so that way the grass plants can store all of that as excess carbohydrates. They're going to have that available to them in the springtime once the growing season starts, and it's going to help ease them out of that winter dormancy a lot faster.
Our third one is there any saving it? ? And this lawn is 85% chickweed.
It's a lot.
By the looks of it. Saving, yes. Quickly, maybe not so much. Chickweed, when we're looking at chickweed, that is going to be a cooler weather weed. That's something that we are currently seeing right now. It is our motto around here. The best defense against weeds is a thick and healthy turf.
This person also asked the question, is nuking it the only option? It depends on exactly what you mean by that. I don't think that I would go through and completely restart
Kill the
this.
whole thing.
No. Why do that when you have some grass that it looks really, really good?
Funny enough, it does.
the grass that is there looks like it is doing really, really well. So eliminating the chickweed, which I agree, 85, if not 90%,
that's up there.
Is chickweed. 4% is dandelions, and then the rest, not even the rest. It looks like they might also have some nimblewill or something like that going on. If you have some grass that's worth saving, then it's worth saving. It's going to be a lot of work, but starting now,
staying on top of it.
Once we clear out weeds, that opens up room for some other weeds. Yes, we start with a clean slate. It's a lot easier to pick off anything that starts popping up later on in the year. That doesn't mean grass is just magically coming back. Depends on what type of grass you're using. We go back to turf type tall fescue. It is what we would consider a bunch type grass. It is not spreading, which is great because it's not going to spread into areas where you don't want it. The downside is you are going to need to help it out with seeding over top of that, where, hey, that's where the overseeding comes from.
Going to get worse before it gets better.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of weeds there that need to be removed, and we need to get some competition in from turf grass to start keeping those out. And this one grows, chickweed specifically grows very heavily. It's almost matted when it grows across, and that's going to spread, and it's going to be very dense. So there's going to be a back and forth of, hey, I can get some turf established right here. It's going to be a slow process, but you don't necessarily have to wipe out the entire lawn to do that.
No.
And spot seeding is always an option on top of it. I mean, when we're looking at that big section right in the middle, that's discolored. It could be that nimblewill, that could be bent grass, that could be a few different types of grass that are in there. I would be hitting that one maybe a couple of extra times, maybe a little bit heavier, just to make sure that we're getting that established right there. Number 4, I didn't think it would happen to me, so I ignored the warnings. Right here we have lawn striping. What would be the cause of striping like this?
Yeah, over fertilization. So you had somebody who was using a push spreader or a machine. It almost looks like a drop spreader, right?
Certain areas.
In certain areas. What they probably had was the deflector down while they were doing passes. I don't necessarily like that the stripes go over the sidewalk.
Me neither.
That bothers me a lot.
No.
Whenever we're doing treatments like this, the process is we want to make sure that we're avoiding leaving anything on the sidewalk. So they could have gone through and blown it off, cleaned it off. Yes, but if you're bordering in the what I would call the government strip, you are not going to be making all of these turns, and you're going to avoid putting fertilizer where you don't want it, which is into the street. They had their deflector down. The passes look really good. It's very consistent.
It is consistent. And this one does appear to be another newer development, a newer neighborhood that we would see. With a new development comes a new lawn.
Sensitive.
Very sensitive lawn.
Yes.
So when we're seeing those over applications, they're probably going to pop a lot more.
I've dealt with a few of these in my time where it's not been anything where I feel like the technician was doing anything egregious, but just a little bit too much overlap or having a deflector down on accident can definitely make this just pop exactly how we're seeing right here with all those lines. It is easy to fix. It really is. You're just going over the lawn in the opposite direction. Now, it wouldn't be 2 days after you've done the treatment, but it truly is as simple as just making sure if this is north and south, these lines, I would be going east and west. So basically a 90-degree angle of where these lines are. And then I would be making certain that my deflector was not down and my spacing was much better. And that's going to help alleviate this. But instead of a drop spreader or rotary spreader where it is going to shoot fertilizer out in all directions forward.
One of the comments says, my wife said the same thing this morning. The funny part is I finally put a striping kit on my Ego, so it's possible I messed all this up myself. That is not so egregious to me. I don't believe that this is caused by a striping kit on a lawnmower by any means.
You would have to have like a liquid fertilizer on the mowing.
Leaking off of the side.
On the mower, on the striping kit. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of like, hey, maybe this is me taking ownership, but this is not something that I would expect on or from a mower.
Seeking Ohio lawn care advice. These are products I have in my garage in Columbus and a wheeled spreader. What I'm not sure of is when to use what and how to consider directions in light of a warmer than usual winter and spring. I have no idea on Lyme or when to treat for grubs. Everything that we're seeing right here, just because we simply don't have the label. So we can't read it to see exactly what's going on in each of these. And so if you have, we've got one with dandelions on the packaging. Those are a winter annual. Those are going to come out pretty early on in the season. We see those start to pop pretty soon.
The turf builder weed and seed. And even just going through the rest of them, the turf builder that stops crabgrass before it invades. There is a pelletized lime, and then there's a grub control.
So for our area specifically, the easiest two for us to tackle without having the labels to read are going to be the grub control and the lime. Lime, it can be a very effective tool for managing your turf grass, but it can also be a harm if you do not understand what you're dealing with. So before ever considering putting down lime, you need to get a soil test to see what the pH of your soil actually is.
Don't guess soil test.
Exactly. In our area specifically, we run a little bit on the high side for soil pH. Making sure you know the soil acidity in your area is 100% necessary before you consider putting down limes. I would take that bag and I would put it on the back shelf. The grub control kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. Those growing degree days, we start to see those development as it gets warm. Can vary a little bit every year, but typically that late spring, early summer is the time that we want to start getting that grub control down.
I see in the comment when to start treating for grubs, which I think we have a few patches. If you have something that it is a preventative, it's getting into the plant. If you already have grubs, that's going to be a little too late to be applying something like that. Now, if it is what we would call a curative, or you have some of that breakthrough and it's designed to take care of them, to control grubs on contact, okay, then you could be using that. Really simple way of testing if you have grubs is you would go to that spot where you're suspecting, you're going to do a tug test. You literally hold on to the grass, you pull back, and if it pulls back like a carpet and you see grubs, you have grubs. If it's coming back like carpet, but there's nothing there might have been grubs at one point in time. You might have a different issue entirely. You don't want to just be applying the stuff just to apply it.
If you find a grub in your lawn, in the soil, that does not necessarily mean you have grub damage. One grub is not going to do noticeable damage to the turf. That's when we're looking for a really high concentration. The best advice though for the other two bags is reading the labels, understanding exactly what they are engineered for and when they're engineered to be used. We want to make sure that, we're not putting down too much when it's warm, especially with that nitrogen, because that can volatilize a little bit, and then just reading what the active ingredients are in there for the weed control, so it's not being over applied or it's being done too early or too late. That would be really specific to those bags though.
The label is the law. If this is a product that you're using, you should be following the directions that are on it. But typically we're basing it off of soil temperatures, not air temperatures. 50 degrees is when things start really taking effect.
So pictures can give us a lot of information about what we're dealing with out on properties. It doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. When you were saying earlier, don't guess soil test. Make sure you know what's going on. Having a professional or a trained set of eyes out there to see the specifics, ID these plants up close and personal. Some grass ID is extremely difficult to do even if you're already standing on the lawn. Send pictures in to us if you have questions for what's going on. We can usually get you a pretty decent answer just over the phone. Contact us at any of our social medias. Give us a call, shoot us a text or an email. Other than that, I think that's it. Do you have anything, Leaf?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Like, subscribe, send us a message on any of our social media platforms. Hit the
link in the description.
Whoa. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.